What is going on, everybody? Patrick Connor here, and welcome to the Knuckles and Gloves podcast. We got a banger for y'all today, bro. We're talking boxing history, a little bit of griping and grumbling and stuff. My boy Aris Pina here, of course, boxing history guru and also CompuBox operator. But my boy, most importantly, how's it going, bro?
It's going. It's going.
Strange news this week, bro. Strange
Yeah.
news.
So, we're in the end of the year. We got a lot of big fights coming up. We got Fury and Usyk rematch coming up. Well, we're recording on Saturday, so tonight we have the ESPN show coming up with their version of Revenge the Rematches with Ramirez, and then, the fight that no one asked for. What was it? Oscar Valdez against Navarrete.
Yeah,
But that's not what
Navarrete.
we're here to talk about. You know what I mean? That's not what we're here to talk about right now. So I'll preface this. I rarely talk about smoking weed or like how much I do, even though all of us that watch the show know that you and I have both like partake in that shit. But I definitely had to smoke a heavy bowl before this just to make sure I'm gonna be calm enough to talk about this because we're here to talk about the fucking Hall of Fame voting that just came out recently this past week. That's the news, all right? And don't get me wrong, guys that we obviously knew that were supposed to get in got in. Manny Pacquiao, for instance, got in. All right, I'm happy for that. That was just a given. I don't want to say happy for that. That's a given. The one I'm happy about is Rodrigo Valdez in the old timers category. Um, those are the two I'll just say like in a good way. Valdez, one of my favorites over the years, and a guy that's been deserving for a long time. I've been voting, as you know, Pat, and people have listened since 2004, and Valdez has always been that guy that's been on the ballot, but that's always been overlooked because been so many names, you know what I mean? And luckily, because of how things have changed and how voting is now, he had a better chance to make it, and so he did. And he obviously had the credentials too. All right. When you look at his record, and obviously Carlos Monzon was the dominant champion of the 70s from the beginning up until around 1977 when he retired. But in that brief period from when did Valdez first emerge? Yeah, I just realized this too. We didn't even like have an intro. We're just getting right into it because I'm so fucking heated about this.
Nah, it's fair. I mean, God, I want to say his career started in the 60s, but now I'm gonna have to
I mean,
look.
like when he really took notice of like being like, one of those guys that was like under Munzone. That was the mid 70s, right? Like the early to mid 70s.
Oh yeah, like when he actually found his way into like the rankings and shit like that would have
Yeah,
been like the early 70s, yeah.
sure. But if you look at his career, man, that was a guy that, excuse me, even though he was under the shadow of Munzon and he lost to them twice when they went head to head. Second time they fought, he ran him close twice, especially the second time. He dropped him one of the few times Munzon was dropped in his career.
Pretty much
And
convinced him to get his ass out.
absolutely. And not only that, he wasn't one of those guys that like, there's been a lot of fighters that even though they were like the secondary champion, they fought the main guy. They might have lost. It was a close fight, whatever, but they didn't really do much after that. No, Valdez was clearly the head guy if Munzon wasn't around because he cleaned out a lot of that division. You know what I mean? There was guys like Bobby Cassidy, a tough contender that Valdez knocked out. The times he beat Benny Briscoe three times, especially the second time when he became champion.
Well, yeah, and that was also how he got his way into the rankings in the first place with
Yeah,
a NABF belt or whatever belt
yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
was.
Exactly. He beat Briscoe by decision first off, and then when they fought for the vacant WBC title, I believe it was, and that was a brutal, beautiful knockout that he scored over Briscoe. Like, in a fight that was nip and tuck again, and Briscoe looked like he was surging a little bit as he tended to do. Valdez caught him with an incredible right cross and another combo, and Briscoe was just flattened out. First time in his career like that. But long story short, Valdez was clearly the second banana and one of those guys that if Monzon wasn't around, he would have dominated that division for a number of years. So very worthy that he got in. Michael Nunn, another one that just got in, worthy of that. But there's just a lot of dark clouds other than that, right?
A couple of them in any case. And I mean, I think a major one that's really baffling. And I mean, I think that it's fair, and also I feel some responsibility to first just say number one, I started voting in what, like 2017, I think. And like, so I mean, I haven't been voting for 20 years like you, but I have been voting for a little bit. And I started voting that first year where all the shit changed. Like that very first year when they made the major changes in the voting was the year that I started. So I think 2017. It doesn't matter. Point is that it was, within a year or so of that. Um, I take that shit seriously. And I take it like as an honor. When I joined the Boxing Writers Association, I felt that was an honor and also kind of like some sort of responsibility, not even necessarily to like the organization or whatever, but to make sure that I wrote things factually and fairly and, tried to become a better writer and stuff like that and wasn't just some fucking dick. And I mean, unfortunately, that's what the organization is basically filled with now. It's just a bunch of fucking dicks. And that's the old dudes. And then a bunch of know nothing idiots for a bunch of the younger people. And I mean, uh, well, we'll get more into that in a second, but back to what I was saying simply about acknowledging the respect and, wanting to be part of this process and loving boxing and history so much that like I felt warmed or whatever by being part of this process. And I was super proud my first fucking couple years. Um, it really started to seem like it was going downhill probably before the pandemic, I would imagine, but like that really tipped shit. I don't know if it tipped business for them so much that they had to change some shit or what, but it's last few years is not like the gathering itself has not. We've already talked about this on another episode, but like seemed pretty limp, dude. Not a whole lot of people there. They weren't able to really attract too many fighters there. They're kind of leaning more heavily on like contemporary fighters and fighters who are fighting now to kind of draw people there, which is not even really working. So I mean, it's been really frustrating, bro. Um, feeling like this is an institution that was pretty cool and part of boxing that is like getting some holes poked in it.
So the thing about the Hall of Fame, all right, and I'm not gonna sit here and try to big time and be like, well, I've been voting this long, so everyone needs to fall in line. I've never been that type of person. I don't even like the term historian sometimes, just because the people that have taken that mantle try to like really put some, asterisk on it and be like, well, you're not like me type thing. That's not me. But that being said, if you're voting, and this goes for any type of Hall of Fame for that matter, it doesn't matter, baseball, basketball, boxing, racing, I don't know, whatever the fuck it was, what I mean, bocce, anything, boggle, I don't know, just take your, do your due diligence. That's all it takes. When we were talking recently amongst a few of our friends and stuff like that, and one of them made the good comment, one of them made a great comment when it was like, you do not need to a lot of these people that vote today are just like in the sense that where they see the list of who's on the ballot, they recognize who they recognize, and then they go back to Twitter and they start arguing about who Tank is, arguing with, or they argue about whatever the current debate is about that day about boxing. And you see these people on the list that have been there for years that deserve the recognition that they've deserved their day in the sun a long time ago. And then you just think of the names that you just recognize, and it's just kind of mind-boggling to me because, for me, for instance, not to not it's crazy too because like I guess we're a part of that age now, and the people that listen to the show are clearly the same thing because we don't have like a super young audience, I'm assuming. But anyways, it's like one of the it's one of those where it's like back in my day things now, right? But when I started voting, and I was blessed to be able to start voting at the age of 19. All right, that was just an anomaly. I was the youngest person to ever get voting privileges at that age, and that's just on my own doing that. But this
Shit,
is
they got 4 11-year-olds now, bro.
probably, man. I have fucking no idea. But I mean, back then that was definitely an eyebrow raiser because people told me too, what's that kid voting for? No, 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 no. And I had to deal with all that different bullshit. But that being said, back then we didn't have YouTube, right? 2004, though, I don't think YouTube existed, or if it did, it was in its absolute infancy. And I remember for a number of years, it took a while before people started getting onto and uploading good fights and this and that and all that. Like it took a while for everything for that matter. Music videos, this, that, like anything does. So I wasn't a tape trader. Um, I think BoxRec was around back then, but I didn't know what that was, so I wasn't really on it like that either. And so I relied more or less on my magazines and books, a couple of websites that I would look at, but they wasn't really dedicated to history. They would just kind of talk about it once in a while and just referring to my OGs. You know what I mean? Like dudes like Hank Kaplan, other guys I met at the Hall of Fame who clearly had been around for decades and decades and decades longer than me. And I would just talk to them about various things and get my own, perspectives. And today, what's crazy to me is that this whole new generation has everything at their fingertips. BoxRec, as we've been talking about on various shows, has everything right there for you. Even if you don't even have to pay a fee, if you don't mind the fucking ads on that, you can still have everything at your fingertips just right there. You know what I mean? YouTube, the same thing. If you don't mind the like everything is just right there for you. All you have to do is just type in a name, and there's not even if it's BoxRec or YouTube, there's 15 different websites who have message boards talking about a various fighter with actually very knowledgeable guys talking about them too. I still go to it. Boxing News 24 is not something I'm like a part of. I'm not a website, not a website, a message board person, but all you gotta do is type in a various name, and every single time I type it in, Boxing News 24 has some kind of like 2 or 3 pages worth of a message board of someone talking about said fighter, and there's always a couple of dudes who are very knowledgeable about that guy talking about it. So like what I'm just trying to say is that you can learn anything you want right there. And the fact that these people that are voting now are just blatantly not even thinking about it and just checking off whatever they think is popular, whoever they like, is fucking crazy to me. Absolutely insane to me.
Yeah, it's really disappointing. And I do kind of like you. I try, at least when it comes to this, I try not to say, "Well, I'm so and so guy." I would rather try to like teach or try to like
Yeah.
pass information along and say, "Check out what I've learned." At least that's what I'm trying to do, trying to kind of impart enthusiasm rather than saying, "This is how it was," or "I know this, so I'm better." And I'm really wary of doing that because of also many of the people who exist in this kind of like boxing history circle, group, community, whatever. They do act that way. They are very insular. They are kind of like, guarding with their information. They don't want to fucking share shit. They don't want shit getting out. They want to be the people to discover shit, stuff like that. And it's just kind of weird to me when this is history, like nobody fucking owns history. And like there's a responsibility here, you know what I mean? And on top of that, like I think a really glaring example might be Israel Vasquez. He
Mm,
just died. He could have been in last year.
yeah. I mean, absolutely. You could have been in the first year he's on the ballot with Rafael Marquez. Those one Vasquez and Marquez are two of the guys right there where kind of like that I can't recall off the top of my head how many people have kind of gone in simultaneously as being rivals. The only one I could think of that I was actually there for was Michael Carbajal and Humberto Chiquita Gonzalez. They went in together, and that was fitting. You know what I mean? Even though their first fight was the best one, the other two were kind of whole home, whatever. They were always going to be intertwined with each other because of that first fight, which was so epic. And not only that, it was the first fight that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, commanded over $1 million for like junior flyweights, right?
Yep.
Like that was the one that
Yeah, it
made
was
them.
like below a certain division. It was the first $1 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it warranted it too because that was a ridiculously fucking fight. Yeah, it was awesome. But they went in together and that was awesome. Um, when Gotti and Ward had their trilogy, I know that the Hall of Fame was trying hard for Gotti to be there. And I don't recall that he ever was. And you know what? I was there during the Hall of Fame during that time. So I would have remembered him obviously being there and he wasn't. Ward was there.
Yeah, he would have
Ward
been swarmed.
1,000% he would have been swarmed. I never met Gotti. Yeah, I always kind of wished I did, but they never, as far as I remember, they never made an appearance at the Hall of Fame together like that. They tried to, but it just didn't happen. but Gotti eventually got in. Um, and there's been, other instances of like stuff like that, but there's never been, for a guy like Vasquez, Vasquez is one of those guys that, off the resume alone has been deserving for a number of years. If you look at it compared to others, it stacks up there. And it's just still mind-boggling today, though. So I guess that's what we're going to be getting into is just like you get to, two guys the for the modern category at least. Yeah, the two guys are obvious, one dude that was going to be absolute shoe and another guy that should have been deserving. But there's still discussion about him because his best win is against a guy that needs to be on the ballot for a number of years. But then the third person who gets in and you just kind of like, yeah, it's a head scratcher. And we're talking about Vinny Paz. Like, so and this is nothing against Vinny, man. I'm a New England person. I grew up watching Vinny. You grew up watching Vinny. We all did. You know what I mean? We know his story. We know the
Yeah,
circumstances, why he came back. And that's an incredible comeback in itself. And,
bro.
very
From
the
like 92 to like 95, the fucking like everybody was rocking the Looney Tunes, something or other. Even when it was not cool, it kind of still returned back for a little bit and was like cool again. And
hmm.
it was Tasmanian Devil, you know what I'm saying? So it was like easy to recognize. He had a big personality, of course, and I remember him.
Totally. And it worked for him. Don't get me wrong. And like, even before his accident, the inspirational story before that, he was a very, exciting fighter. But when it comes down to it, I remember when he first initially got on the ballot, and there was discussion before that too. Like I was talking, like again, when I say I consulted with my OGs, like I was talking to guys like Kaplan. I was talking to guys like, well, I don't know if Kaplan was still active when Vinny Paz got on the ballot. I'm pretty sure he would have approved of that. But I was talking to Don Majeski and others. That's better. And they they were discussing it and they were talking like, oh, Paz was a popular guy and other ones. And I just kind of gave them a side eye like Paz. And a couple of dudes would kind of give me the same look like, yeah, yeah, I know. But like whatever it was, but some people are on that ballot, I don't mean to be too extreme, but like, remember back in 2016 when Trump initially was starting to like run, right? And when no one really thought that he was actually going to become president. So we thought of it more as a joke and we would just joke about, oh, yeah, if he actually got in one day and da 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 da. And then it actually happened. You're just kind of
Yeah,
like,
we're all joking like, this country's just twisted enough to fucking
yeah,
vote a guy like that. And then a couple months later, we're like,
exactly. And that's how, that's what I mean. I not to be like too extreme, but when it comes to Hall of Fame things, you're just kind of like, wait, what the fuck? We actually did this now?
yeah, dude, no, I don't have anything personal against him. He's kind of annoying on social media, but hey, dude, a lot of people think that about me. So I don't really, that doesn't factor for me as far as whether or not he should be in the Hall of Fame. I don't care about that. Also, he has an extremely fucking annoying, obnoxious, and like abrasive and kind of abusive fucking PR person who like goes after people along with Trisha Morrison. Fucking lunatics. Just being honest.
I knew I had to find something. All right. So just to give you perspective on back in the day of like, when the Hall of Fame actually meant something. So I just brought up a KO magazine from what year was this? July 2000. July 2000 at KO, right? And they were can you see this? Who are tomorrow's Hall of Famers? So Roy Jones on his way. Floyd Mayweather, too soon to tell, which is hilarious. Vinny Paz makes the list though. Can you see that? What it says? Forget
Forget
about
about
it.
and he was already like done by he didn't like
Yeah,
accomplish anything after
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And I bet you some of the motherfuckers who were behind that probably fucking voted for him too. Fucking
Sure.
idiots. Oh my God, dude. I got nothing against the guy.
No,
Like I said, these total fucking lunatics doing his dirty work are weird as fuck. But like beyond that, let's set that aside for a sec. Just look at his fucking accomplishments. Look at his
I can show
record.
you. I'm fucking vaping now with this. I
I
don't care.
don't give a fuck. Do it.
Let's
Uh, you know, like looking at his accomplishments, the fact of the matter is he lost the vast majority of the fights where he like, would be considered
Yeah.
stepping up to like a, world class level or like his biggest fights, whatever, except for like one. And I mean, even then it's kind of questionable. Like, is that the kind of like win or are those two wins, the kind of wins that get you into the Hall of Fame when most of it's like you got to like a harrowing story that is extremely inspirational and motivational, no question, broke a part of your neck. Not only did you like, start to walk again and rehab your life, but you actually got back into boxing. That's amazing. Is
Yeah.
that the kind of thing that in and of itself gets you into the Hall of Fame? Look, dude, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before and getting into briefly. When this Hall of Fame was set up, and when pretty much any Hall of Fame is set up, right? There are these fucking idiots every time we do the voting or there's inductions where people go, look, buddy, it's the Hall of Fame. Okay. Do you know what fame means? It's somebody's famous. And it's like, bro, don't fucking play semantics word games with me. Okay. We all know what we're talking about here is like the greatest, the best. These are the fighters that are getting in first, or at least in theory, right? This is what's supposed to happen. But look at all of these halls of fames, baseball, basketball, rock and roll Hall of Fame, et cetera, fucking et cetera. All of these Hall of Fames have gotten to a point where it's a popularity contest or there's something weirdly political about it. And there's people who deserve to get in and should have gotten in fucking 20 years ago, but never did. And now there's some weird thing. It's the exact same type of thing, except for that wasn't what it was supposed to be with boxing, because this is a small community now.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people don't think about it that way because they'll be like, oh, like 4 million people watched that fight. Okay, but like, maybe like 150,000 of them are going to be the people who return back next week for fucking Joe fucking Bangkok versus Tommy fucking Egg Face or
Out in
whatever.
Bahama. Yeah.
Who the fuck knows? This is a small niche sport. And so it wasn't supposed to be political or weird like that when it came to this fairly simple Hall of Fame where we can like get knowledgeable people in theory who are voting and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But now it's kind of devolved to a point where apparently not only is the popularity mattering and stuff like that, but we're kind of like automatically giving voting privileges to people who have openly shown that they don't really care that much about history. They don't really know that much about history. And the critical thinking when it comes to that kind of stuff is on a pretty fucking low level. And I mean, I don't know. I know that sounds mean. Maybe it sounds rude. There's going to be people who got in recently, the last 2 years, 3 years, are going to be like, ugh, hope he's not talking about me. I hate him. I don't care. So what, dude? I'm probably not going to be in that fucking organization anymore anyways. Who cares? Because look at it. Look at it. Look at what it is. Look at what we're doing here. You know what I'm saying? So, just Vinny Pazienza, there's no credentials there. And then on top of that, I heard it from multiple people that when he got up and spoke at the fucking podium, he's making like, semi-veiled fucking like threats of violence at fucking the Hall of Fame staff
It was
and the owners.
semi-failed. It was like straight up. What the fuck, Ed Brophy? Like, you know how you put me in? I'm giggling, but at the same time, I'm
Yeah,
threatening.
that's what I mean. Like he was trying to like
Yeah,
soften it and going like, haha, I'll fucking slit your throat.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
the fuck,
No,
dude? Are you fucking crazy? And so then now, like on top of that, like I was saying, I saw like two votes for him at all. I'm not saying that people didn't vote for him. I'm saying I didn't see people voting for him or saying that they did. So I don't know what the fuck happened. But the fact that there's zero transparency with the process, like people kind of know the basics of the process. We don't know the numbers. We don't know anything about when they're counted, who's counting them. And then on top of that, a family of fucking cops just fucking took over a bunch of shit at the Hall of Fame. We don't fucking like cops on this show, bro. So I don't
so much
fucking
to
know.
there's so much to like unravel with this shit. So, all right, when it comes down to the voting, first off, to the people that vote and stuff like that, as you know, we talked about this earlier. I'm a fan of because I'm a wrestling fan, obviously. I'm a fan of Jim Cornette's podcast. Not everything. I'm not gonna sit there and listen to 3 hours of it, but I pick and choose, the segments I'm gonna watch
He's
or listen.
kooky, but he's like kooky about wrestling, kind of like how we are about boxing
Yeah, about
history.
boxing. So I get him, you know what I mean? And he has a very knowledgeable partner in Stu Brian Last, who they have a great show in general. But anyways, they had a segment the other day when they were talking about the Wrestling Observer News Hall of Fame. So the Wrestling Observer News Hall of Fame is the Hall of Fame that's run by Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer News. You know what I mean? Like that one newsletter that's been around for Jesus forever, it seems, right? And it is a prestigious Hall of Fame, I guess.
Meltzer, also a highly knowledgeable guy, but also kind of
Meltzer,
weird.
yeah, absolutely, certainly weird. But there's that is one of the more prestigious, I guess, Hall of Fames in wrestling. I guess someone else could correct me if I'm wrong on that, but there was a discussion on that. There was a discussion on that because there was this past year they had the same, the rest the Hall of Fame was they had their inductions at least a couple of weeks before the Hall of Fame, Boxing Hall of Fame came out with ours. And it's the same thing. It was a lot of eyebrow raisers in terms of who was being inducted, right? And they did a segment, a good like half an hour or close to 40 minutes talking about it. And a good portion of that segment was talking about who the fuck is voting for these people now and who are the voters just in general, you know what I mean? Which is a valid question because, in the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame, they have it spaced out where it's supposed to be like I don't know. I don't know all the subcategories, but there's one supposed to be historians, media, whoever that's supposed to be, former, current wrestlers and former wrestlers, which is actually wild to think about. Imagine being a current wrestler who's on the ballot with another dude, be like, yeah, if you vote for me, I'll vote for you. It's like shit like that or something. But I don't know how it works out. But anyways, it comes out with a lot of questionable votes that they were just asking who the fuck is voting for this in general. And that's what we should be doing for boxing because it's not even just Vinny Paz. There was a lot of other ones too that people were posting their ballots on Twitter, and you would just look at the names on that, and you would just kind of like absolute, not even a head scratcher, just like a straight up the fuck, because it just doesn't make any logical sense. A lot of the names on the ballot in general don't make logical sense, let alone voting for them in first off, because well, as you and I have discussed and on the show, off the show, even with our friends, whatever it may be, there are a ton of guys that are still not on the ballot for whatever reason it may be. You know what I mean? Whether you want to vote for them or not, they deserve their day in the sun of being on the ballot. Off the top of my head right now, again, Humble Calambe. That's the guy I was talking about with Michael Nunn. Michael Nunn rightfully got inducted to Hall of Fame. I've been voting for him for the past few years since until he eventually got in. But if it comes down to it, his most impressive one, his biggest one, the one that everyone just kind of like the eye raiser, was against Calambe because his first round knockout, the way he blew him out. Calambe was so respected, everything like that. And Calambe was a great fighter, a great champion. You look at his resume, and he has a lot of credible wins, especially being the first one to beat Mike McCallum and such. This guy was a great fighter. Why is he not on the ballot? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You know what I mean? Um, Simon Brown. We've talked about Simon Brown before countless times on the show. Welterweight champion, junior middleweight champion, number of defenses. Unlike Vinny Pazienza, who never made a single defense of either crown that he was on that he held, and just count like a really good, solid fighter for a number of years, involved in fights of the year, involved in unification title fights. You know what I mean? Just a really good overall guy. Why is he not on the ballot? Marlon Starling is another one. Iran Barkley is another one. If you want to put heavyweights, go to heavyweight division. I guess Chris Bird deserves to be on the ballot if you look at others in terms of what's going on, stuff like that. Like there's a number of guys over there, and then you see people that are on the ballot, and again, it's a head scratcher. And the Hall of Fame, I've noticed too, not to keep on going whatever, but like some of these people, it almost seems like there's a trend where they kind of they value like longevity more than anything. You know what I mean? Because look at some of the names like Archer Gregorian, who was a longtime WBO champion, Van Aki, who was a longtime champion, Henry Masque, let's go, Gianfranco Rossi, and those
Yeah,
guys
where
were a
they
long
had like a
time
shitload
champions.
of defenses,
But
but
against
against
fucking fluff.
comparatively very like clearly
Yeah,
lower level
a lot of
opposition
fluff.
when there
Exactly.
was other shit going on in their division at the same time.
Exactly. So
That's
that's
the problem.
yeah. So, you see where I'm going with this bullshit?
You know, Yeah, dude. A lot of it is how they're selecting. I couldn't tell you exactly how they were selecting the voters at first. It seems to me, and again, this also goes to the fact that there's like not really a whole lot of transparency behind the process. We know who the voters are, or at least some of the voters are, because if you go to the Boxing Writers Association website and you can see the membership lists. I'll probably not be on that list very much longer, but nonetheless, you could see the membership lists of the people who are allowed to vote. But there's a whole chunk of other people who also vote who aren't like people don't know them or at least I mean I'm not saying nobody knows them. I'm saying that like the average voter or whatever, they don't even know them or know that they vote, et cetera, et cetera. And so I couldn't say how it was set up in the first place, but it sounded to me like it was basically set up so that they went to people like Hank Kaplan and Don Majeski and were like, who are the fucking history people? And went to those kinds of people. That's
Yeah.
what it sounded like. And so since then, at some point, it's been shifted to if you're on the Boxing Writers Association, you get a vote. And unfortunately, dickheads like Mike Coppinger bragged about it in a really stupid way so much that a lot of other people thought, oh, well, I can do that and I can make it and I could also be part of that process. I'm not blaming him solely. People like him, dickheads like him, I'm saying, multiple. Nonetheless, that transition to that sort of process of writers, it's like in theory, you think like, oh, this is like the boxing media. These are the people who are paying attention to the fights and that blah, blah, blah. Look, dude, there's this kind of like hang up about the media and the way people think about boxing. And I kind of make fun of this sometimes with the whole people being overly sappy and poetic about boxing. I'm guilty of doing that in my own writing in the past too. Sometimes for effect, sometimes to make people, to evoke feelings when you're writing. That's valid. But at the same time, when you're talking about the factual things about the sport, it does
Mm.
not help to speak that way. It does not help to mask the brutality of what is actually going on. And it doesn't help to, we talk about the true crime shit on those podcasts. It does not help to fucking sugarcoat that type of shit either, be factual about it. Back in the 19 teens, 20s and all those types of shit, you're talking about some of the great writers, Naughton, Jack Cuddy, fucking, Damon Runyon, and then moving forward, Norman Mailer, Hemingway, Joyce Carol Oates. I think even Baldwin wrote some shit about boxing. And a lot of these great writers were encouraged to cover boxing and write about boxing because that would also create interest. You couldn't go to YouTube. You couldn't go and just grab a VHS and watch fights over and over. The only way to really relive them is if you were lucky, you saw them in a theater like once every couple of years with the camera around or some shit. Otherwise, you read a book and you
Yeah.
read about these fights and you read about these poetic writers writing about these epic fights that are beautiful and wonderful and artistic and savage and all this type of fucking shit. And so people got stuck on that, I feel like, because they're still try for that. They never got away from that. And that also disallows us from one, talking more factually about boxing and what it's doing to the fighters and how to deal with and how to deal with the problems in boxing. That makes it more difficult, but then it also, what it does in my opinion, going back to this voting process, it fucks up the voting process if you're relying on writers now where the entire media structure has completely changed. I swear to God, I'm almost done. Boxing is so dependent now on basically media covering the fights for free. They're dependent on people covering it for access and covering it favorably. They're dependent on that. They don't act like they are. They'll, wield that shit as a fucking cudgel. And the thing is, you have to kiss ass and write about fighters the way they want you to, or you're not going to be doing it. And if that is the environment, and that's the environment that you're taking the writers and the voters from, no wonder you have a bunch of fucking idiots, bro. That's what that's what this is. And now, of course, they've in the Boxing Writers Association have started kind of like, allowing in the YouTuber and the kind of video coverage type of people. I don't think there's anything wrong with that inherently. That's not what I'm saying. But what they do is that they do it based on like the subscriptions and the views and shit. Nah. So anyway, like I said, it was a long-winded way of saying that the voting process is fucked up. They fucked it up. And now with the voting process fucked up and then producing weird results and then the actual event and the induction being not good,
Yes.
what are we doing?
So hold up, I'm gonna bring this up really quick. Maybe you can get it quicker. What year was Ken Norton inducted into the Boxing Hall of Fame?
What's that?
What year was Ken Norton inducted into the Hall of Fame? Was that like 91? Like he was earlier in the 90s, like 91,
Um,
92-ish.
well, let's check this out because it'll say on the
Hmm?
92.
92?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Ken Norton, I want to say, was the first person inducted into the Hall of Fame, at least one of the first people that was questioned about being inducted. Now, just put that in perspective now, all right? Because I remember that.
Yeah, it's so elite.
Hmm.
It's getting such top names in that they're like, Norton already? Really? Come on.
That's what I'm saying back then. Like, and I guess maybe in the sense back then too that like you had so many names that were available to be inducted that you would
Totally.
have to question someone like
Yeah,
Norton.
they're like inducting like 20 people per year and shit.
Yeah, I mean the first year of the Hall of Fame is the most. You think of that photo that Turkey put up saying that was the most impressive list of like fighters together of all time or whatever it was when he did that Saudi Arabia photo op. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, that was a cool looking photo, and it was like impressive to see all those people together in one photo like
Yeah.
that. But that, I mean, and we're not even talking about, back for what I was just talking about. Like we're talking all the way back to the 40s when you have like all those guys together and in the suits and other shit like that. You know, the one with fuck, the bantamweight champion over there.
I should
Um,
have probably fucking uh I should probably at some point figure out how to do like the screen sharing or whatever so that I could do
yeah,
it
yeah,
just because I
yeah.
have so many fucking photos and shit. But like, yeah, there's that group of fighters from, is it this one? Yeah, this is Bob Foster, Archie Moore, Carmen Basilio, Gene Fulmer, Carlos Ortiz, looks like Emil Griffith, Sandy
Well,
Sadler, fucking Kid Gavilan. Wow, I'm so old. I'm holding up glasses to my face. Ike Williams, Alexis Arguello, Ken Norton, Angelo Dundee, Eder Joffre, and then I'm not sure who that is on the end. Maybe I don't know who that is. Well, anyway,
Hall of Fame?
just who I fucking mentioned is pretty massive.
Was that the Hall of Fame?
Yeah.
Jesus, that's an insane group right there.
Yeah, that's just one photo, and that's not all of the fighters who were there.
Yeah, I mean, but so what I'm getting at is that so the Hall it's kind of fascinating to think about how the Hall of Fame in terms of the inductions and people questioning things have gone over the years. Because bless you, back in the early days, um, the very early like the first induction class, right? Right. I mean, you have your pick of the litter. So obviously that's going to be one of the biggest um classes you can imagine because that's the first one. So that was the one that where they had Ali and they had Jesus man, everybody was in that one. Like I think Frazier was in 91, but I mean they had Ali, there was Bob Foster, there was Archie Moore, I think Floyd Patterson was in that one. Um
Like Jimmy
Ike
McLarnin
Williams.
was there.
Yeah, it was a whole host of names. It was absolutely incredible how many people were there. Sandy Sadler, Willie Pep, the list goes on and on and on. Billy Backus. I say that as a joke, but it's only because Basilio was getting inducted and Backus was his nephew.
Yeah, yeah. And wherever Basilio goes, Bacchus goes.
And he literally was in the ring when that whole group of guys was being introduced and stuff like that for that ring. They're like, here's welterweight champion Billy Backus, everybody. But
Welterweight champion for about 14 days.
yeah, good for him. I mean, I ride
Yeah,
that shit.
don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to talk shit. It's just funny. Like
Absolutely. Do you
anyway,
think he's ever paid for a drink in his life since then, at least back
I
locally
hope
home?
he hasn't. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah. Ah, there's Billy.
and you know
Uh,
what? And we joke, and just to emphasize for anybody watching or listening, we want all of the fighters to get recognized and acknowledged.
yes.
All of them, 100%. But it's not. We're not talking about like acknowledgement and recognition in general. We're talking about the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. Yeah. And Backus was a cool guy. Obviously, I've seen him over
right?
the years.
Nothing
He's
against him
and
personally at all.
local, yeah, nice guy. But So that was a massive class. But anyways, when Norton got inducted, that was the first time when people were just kind of like, wait, why is Norton getting inducted? Because if you really do look at his record, his biggest, obviously he beat Ali, broke his jaw, and that was like his claim to fame. Arguably got robbed in the first in their second fight, definitely got robbed in their third fight. But after that, his credentials are kind of thin, beats Sherry Corey, beats a couple of other contenders, but like when it really steps up, got blown out by George Foreman and lost to Larry Holmes, and then his career ended with Jerry Cooney. So that was rightfully so questioned, or like, are we voting Norton and just off of basis off of that because it's supposed to be a Hall of Fame, like the absolute best of the best, right? And then over the years, more questionable names started coming in. Another one that people sort of forget about because they always like kind of harp on Gotti or Barry McGuigan is Ignomar Johansson. Johansson got inducted early 2000s, I want to say,
He's got a
and
pretty thin ledger, man.
extremely thin ledger. Never made a title, heavyweight title defense. I mean, beat Patterson and beat him like a fucking drum, but like he beat Patterson, he knocked out Eddie Machen, he knocked out Henry Cooper, and had a couple other wins. What else was there besides that? Nothing really. And so he got in. And then the more recent ones that everyone keeps on going back to because when it goes to it, like, if you want to go back the past 20 years, these are the most glaring ones are Barry McGuigan and Arturo Gatti. But naming all those names, if you notice, there's like a pattern each year, like the quality of like the resumes and everything kind of goes down a little bit more. You know what I mean? When it comes down to it, like you have a guy like Norton, and if you put Norton on the ballot today, everyone would have made him a first ballot Hall of Fame and not even thinking twice about it, just because of the way the voting process is.
Yeah.
But if you go back to what you say, 1992 when he got in, like that was like being questioned. Ignomar Johansson, same thing, heavily questioned as he should have been, because like why would you vote Johansson in? Um, and then McGuigan as well, which and McGuigan came in the first year I voted, so I voted for the in 2004 for the class of '05, and that's when McGuigan, Terry Norris, Bobby Chacon, and I guess someone else got in that year. I don't remember who the other guy was, but that was, I remember when that happened too, and everyone was just like, yo, McGuigan, McGuigan, why'd that happen? I didn't vote for McGuigan. I knew better than I did. I did vote for Norris. I did vote for Bobby Chacon and whoever else, what it was. I think Delilio Loyal. That's what it was. I think Loy got in that. So I had a longtime junior welterweight champion, Delilio Loy, who's forgotten, but definitely a Hall of Famer. Um, Chacon, Hall of Famer. Terry Norris, rightfully a Hall of Famer, and then you have McGuigan. And McGuigan too. Like he has good wins on his resume. Don't get me wrong. He beat Juan Laporte. Paul Divorce wasn't a champion, but he was a good fighter. And
But he dethroned Pedrosa. That's his,
exactly, that was
his
his
calling
big.
card.
That was literally his calling card. Exactly, and that was like the big thing about it. Like because his two defenses after that, I think he beat Cabrera and then he beat Bernard Taylor, and then he lost to Stevie Cruz, and that was it. Like he tried to make it a comeback, but it didn't really work out for him, and that was basically the be all end all of it. How does that one make a Hall of Famer just off of a huge win like that?
Well, and it
Oh,
really seemed and I remember at the time too because there was a pretty decent argument about it and a lot of people criticizing it, and in my opinion, rightfully so too, especially if we're taking the stance that we are,
sure.
and kind of adding that. Well, he was super influential and he bridged the gap between Protestants and Catholics and North and South and Ireland at the time during the Troubles when it was, I'm not disagreeing. I'm not, that's important. And I have nothing, I'm not talking shit about that at all. That's not the point though. We're not talking about necessarily influence per se. If we're talking about, and I guess that's why that it needs to be made clear then. You know what I'm saying? Like it needs to be made clearer by the facility and by the people handling the voting process what exactly is happening. It needs to be clear, where the votes are going, all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, dude.
But that's what I mean is like it's just that it's gone down, it's been downgraded since then. So like McGuigan gets in and okay, like I mentioned his wins. He has decent wins. Like so besides, the big one over Pedrosa, like I said, he beat Juan Laporte, he beat Bernard Taylor and a couple other guys, but his career just was like abbreviated. You know what I mean? Like after he lost the title to Stevie Cruz, he retired initially, came back, um, had a couple of wins, and then he lost to what was it Jim McDonald on a cut stoppage, and that was the end of his career. Like so, you move on. The same thing with Gotti too. Like Gotti, he popular, super popular fighter. I get it, you know what I mean, and everything like that. But I mean, he still had more. What I'm just trying to say is that like all these guys that it keeps on going down and down and down till where you get to Pazienza now. And this isn't a knock on Vinny in terms of being a person, how popular he was, because he was extremely popular in Rhode Island. But look at his credentials. That's what it comes down to. Look at his credentials, all right? He beats Greg Haugen in an arguable decision for the lightweight championship. Doesn't make a defense, loses it immediately afterwards in a rematch to Haugen. Um, for the rest of that was the 80s, right? For the rest of that decade, he in high profile title fights, he loses a decision to Roger Mayweather. Um, and going to the 90s, if you count the WBO title back then, loses the decision to Hector Camacho, loses against Loreto Garza, who's completely forgotten today for the junior welterweight crown. Um, does move up and beats Gilbert Dele for the junior middleweight title, but he doesn't make a defense either. Not because of his fault, he gets into a car accident that derails his career, unfortunately. But when he comes and then he comes back, and I get it. That's an incredible accomplishment for you to come back from almost being paralyzed or almost killed and everything like that, and that's big in itself. But what's his post-fight career since then? I know he has that tattoo calling himself a five-time world champion, but what were those other titles since he did that? And who was he fighting? Because every time he stepped up again, with the exception of what Dana Rosenblatt, he lost. And he lost like wide. It wasn't like he was having close fights with these guys. His biggest wins again were Haugen, Gilbert Dele, a completely washed Lloyd Honeyghan, um, Dana Rosenblatt in that first fight, which he was getting his ass kicked in. And then, am I missing someone? I don't know.
He had like, well, all of the wins over like recognizable dudes. Obviously, Roberto Duran. It's
Oh yeah, Duran. I always
like
forget about
struggle
that.
to even
Thought
bring
about
that
it.
up
Yeah,
or
exactly.
bring those fights up because he did it twice. Like, embarrassing himself fighting that version of Duran once wasn't enough. He had to do it again. Hey, dude, you got to do it for the money. I get it, but come
He
on, don't
almost
act
lost
like
that first fight. He should have almost lost that first fight. He got dropped and Duran was moving on him and beating on him.
which is saying something in fucking
Yes,
1990s Duran, you know what I'm saying? And then 1993 Lloyd Honeyghan when he's at the end of his career
exactly.
and
That's what I mean.
and
Yeah.
also was, not generally considered like he scored a massive upset and considered one of the biggest upsets in British boxing history. Beyond that, generally not considered a super great fighter and was at the end of his career. So point being that these wins that he has were not the greatest wins on the face of the planet. And then pretty much every time he actually stepped up, he lost.
And lost comprehensively. These were not close fights. And that's the thing about it too, Pat, is that like when he lost, and again, as the smoke cloud comes in front of me, because I'm just feeling that way today. I don't give a fuck, man. I'm just so annoyed about this shit. He it was just one of those things that like it wasn't he was never considered the best of his division. He never was in the fight of the year. He never beat the best in his division, and when he lost comprehensively. Like it wasn't like it was like close fights where oh man, like he could have almost pulled it off at the thing. The Camacho fight was more exciting in the buildup than the actual fight was. When Camacho threw a tampon on him at him and called him a bleeder, which is hysterical. And then Azianza Pazienza threw a tutu at him because he called him a runner and a dancer. So, they were getting into the whole shtick of it. But, like, the fight didn't end up as good as that because Camacho was doing his thing and Pazienza just chased him. The Mayweather fight, come on, Pazienza just ate punches the whole fight and lost a wide decision. Lou Duva came in, tried to get all wild about it, and got his ass knocked out too. Um, the Loreto Garza fight. Loreto Garza, who was a good fighter, don't get me wrong, from the Sacramento area, was one of those guys, but his completely forgotten because he was only champion for a cup of coffee. But his one defense was a high profile one Paz, which he was outboxing him and easily whooping himself like that. So Paz lost his mind and got disqualified in that fight. You know what I mean? And then like again, when you come back after he beats Daly, he was supposed to fight his mandatory challenger was Julio Cesar Vasquez at junior middleweight, right? And say Paz didn't have that car accident, he was going to fight Vasquez. There's a good chance Vasquez was going to thump him badly. We've seen how Vasquez was in general after that. He was one of those hard-nosed Argentinian fighters from the same mold as Roldan and Victor Galindez and others who were just rugged and strong and thick, but also really skilled in themselves too. Paz at that point, he probably would have got beat up, you know what I mean? But like I said, he comes back, and his whole career after that is like kind of based around the Connecticut Foxwoods area. Obviously, fine, he's hugely popular over there. And you can bring in opponents, but how does that building his Hall of Fame career? Because every time after that, he lost. Like in a big step up fight. Like I said, he beats Rosenblatt, but he should have lost that. Roy Jones massacred him. Harold Graham ran around him and tap danced over his face for 12 rounds. Eric Lucas beat him. Aaron Davis, who was brought in as an opponent, chopped him up and stopped him. What are we doing?
It doesn't really make much sense. And we're not the only ones either. We're not
Yeah.
the only ones that are like, what? Like we are definitely not the only ones, but we're probably the only or two of the only ones that are even willing to say some shit, really. Because everybody wants to keep their shit. Everybody wants to be part of the process. Everyone wants to stay involved, which I get, but at some point it's like, what the fuck, bro?
And yeah, I'm sorry. And I also get like in the fact that if you're a big fan of Paz and the whole thing, and everyone's like, well, there was some people on Twitter saying it's the Boxing Hall of Fame, and you understand he was famous and da 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 da. Even then, it doesn't matter. There's no other sport where they're going to take a guy because they were insanely popular and just put him in, even if they didn't have the credentials to be in there. It just doesn't make any sense. And Paz falls in that category, all right? Yes, he came back from a broken neck and he's inspirational. I get that. But that movie wasn't even good either. That shit flopped. I know exactly people, oh, they made a movie on him. So, like, if that's the case, Antonio Tarver, like Cliff Rhodes said on in his article the past day or two, he made a comment something like, if we're basing things on that, he played a part in Rock in the last Rocky film, which was seen by a lot more eyes than fucking Paz's film. So why isn't he in then?
Yeah, that makes no fucking sense, dude. I don't know what they're doing, and I don't know how we ended up here specifically, and an explanation would be cool. Um, and I did actually want to say, lest we spend the entire time talking about only the guys, I did want to
Fuck that. Yeah.
mention too, real quick, that also getting in the women's class were Jessica Chavez and Sophie Mathis and Mary Jo Sanders. And
Hmm.
basically, it's tough to really qualify what's happening with women going into the Hall of Fame because we already know this. I'm not stating anything that's controversial or crazy. Like, we this is factual. Not as much money has been spent developing women as fighters and women's boxing. That's a big part of the problem. And just not to get too off on a tangent when people say, well, that's simple numbers, it's simple facts. Women don't draw as much as men. And they'll say that about like the WNBA too, which I'm not arguing that they do. What I'm saying, however, is that there's a whole lot more money and resources going into the men than there is the women. So to compare the two like that is not logical or fair. That being said, they've also had a far shorter time to develop competition
Yeah.
and build up the divisions and stuff like that. The heavier divisions are still really tough. There's not a lot of opposition up there, but in the lower divisions, they've gotten pretty deep over, especially the last few years. Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor, especially, like their two fights, fantastic fights, and they both seem to have really influenced a lot of really young women fighters, which is great. Um, and on top of that, I'm not even gonna come close to talking trash about any of these fighters getting in. Look, Mary Jo Sanders, she's a two, or if depending on like which kind of organizations you're counting, because in the early 2000s there was some kind of switching around with like the major sanctioning organizations for women's boxing. So I don't know how the purists do it in terms of recognition, but she could be considered a three division champion. And then you have Jessica Chavez, two division champion, and Sophie Mathis, same thing. So these are worthy accomplishments, especially in women's boxing within a fairly short period of time. Not questioning those whatsoever, but there was a big stink and an ongoing fucking stink in the case of Iceman Scully, because he never stops talking about Jackie Tonawanda, bro. And when I say he never stopped, bro. There are a number of fighters like we've already mentioned that we feel don't really belong in the Hall of Fame. And
Yeah.
you could pick any of those out, but instead he has chosen to just poke at Jackie Tonawanda, despite the fact that she died of cancer like 15 years ago or something. God, leave her alone. But the point is that Jackie Tonawanda, just to kind of briefly get in on this, in case people go, I don't know who that is, or I know the name but don't know what's going on.
We please educate them, man, because like it's I'm not to cut you. I feel like
I
it's
mean,
people have to understand that with the initial class of the women's wing of the Boxing Hall of Fame, when they first had a class come up and stuff like that, people are just like, "Oh my God, Jackie Tonawanda was a bunch of lies and she did this and then she did da 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 da." All right, maybe she did have a couple of like tall tales that she told people or whatever, which a lot of people fucking did during their career. Everyone did. A lot of Hall of Famers, your favorite fighters of all time, came up with, especially in the early days, came up with different scenarios that they talked about and things that they did, and everyone took them at face value. That was passed on from generation to generation to generation. And if you brought it up today, it would not be looked at in the same regard of like such hate and angst as what Tonawanda talked about. Regardless of all that, she was a trailblazer in the sense that she fought for the right for women to be able to fight, and what Amanda Serrano, bless you, what Amanda Serrano was able to do today, or what Katie Taylor was able to do today, or what Clarissa Shields, or before then, Layla Ali, Christy Martin, Ann Wolf, and the list goes on and on. All right. Tonawanda was a part of that initial class. And there are photos of her because it wasn't like she was just some anomaly that came up and made a bunch of claims of her with fighters who are Hall of Famers as well. Then that initial class, whether like Tiger Tremere, and I want to say Kat Davis, was in that with a photo with them too. But all right, they were all there. Okay, you know what I mean? And she fought for it. She went to court for it. And if it wasn't for her being able to build it what she did, there would be none of that. And so for these fucking chuckle fucks out there bragging, yelling and getting mad and getting all griped and about because she didn't have real fights or she wasn't a real champion or whatever the fuck it may be, if it wasn't for her, there wouldn't be a building ground for what there is today. So stop.
in at least in the terms of the logic, this is going to probably piss some people off. Needless to say, I don't care. But like Jake Paul,
Yeah.
people say he's not a real fighter. Absolutely, he is. 100% he's a real fighter. What do you mean he's not a real fighter? He's fighting real fights. He's a real fighter. You might not like him. I don't really like him. He's kind of a dickhead. But he has a clear influence. He's a real fighter. Back to Jackie Tonawanda, that's basically what happened was when she was put in, and not even to be clear, she was in the women's boxing pioneer category, not like the modern or whatever. And I don't feel like I need to define that, but a pioneer, somebody who paved the way. And so basically, in the mid 1970s, there was a big push by a number of women to get licensed to box. There were some promoters around the U.S. who were willing to put on women's boxing shows or add women to their shows, except for there was no real law on the books in some of these states. They were like, we don't know what to do. And so what happens when they don't know what to do? They just do it. They're fucking, they're not going to worry about what they're going to do. And then eventually there was like an outcry or whatever. And some of these women, like some of whom you just mentioned, like Kat Davis, who I'll bring up again in a moment, Marion Trimiar and Jackie Tonawanda in particular, they actually sued the state of New York to get boxing licenses in New York, and were the first three women, at least that I'm aware of, to ever get licensed in the state of New York. So that in of itself, massive. The issue with Jackie Tonawanda was that she was kind of like a gym fighter, somebody who hung around the gym. Um, she wasn't in super great shape, at least by the look at her. Like she wasn't like ripped, but she also didn't really look like somebody I was about to mess with, to be honest. Like she looked like she'd fuck me up. And I think that it was the either the light heavyweight or the heavyweight, or it could have been both. She claimed the women's championship and said, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say she said she was 34-0. I'd have to look, but it was something like that. It was like some, somewhat impressive number that she claimed. The problem was that nobody could find any records of these actual fights that were, according to her. And so, in any case, she actually wound up kind of, I think, endearing herself to a number of the people in the gym and then wound up getting licensed, fighting once professionally that we can verify, lost the fight. And then from there, it kind of cascaded at least. Well, no, let me kind of rewind slightly. Her career ended, but she actually was a trainer for a long time after that. And she trained amateurs in New York for a number of years. And not only did she train them, she sponsored a whole bunch of amateurs around New York. And she also hung around in the gym with Muhammad Ali, called herself the female Ali. And Ali used to joke that that was her bodyguard and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And then also she was in camp with George Foreman during George Foreman's comeback, believe it or not, and helped during George Foreman's comeback. There were some
We've seen the
photos.
photos of it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some photos of that. And according to George, there was nothing like she wasn't like a swindler, according to him. And according to Ali, Ali didn't think she was a swindler. I think he just kind of thought she was a character, kind of like him. And that was the whole thing that she tried to take on. She'd wear the shirt that said female Ali and shit like that. She was good at marketing herself.
Well,
That's
no, no, no. Read the hit piece by Randy Gordon. Randy Gordon that's endorsed by John Scully. By all means, people, go for that.
Well, and
But
that's the thing is that, like, a couple of these old school writers, Arn Lang went on about it too. He had like a two or three freaking piece, like a two section, or two
yeah,
part piece or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
And then Randy Gordon had his own thing. They're going on and on about how she's a fake fighter. I'm not saying she
Well,
did have those fights. I'm not arguing that. I don't really care. My point is more why the focus on her when now swinging back to Kat Davis.
yeah.
A lot of people know Kat Davis because she was the first woman featured on the cover of Ring magazine in 1974,
That's just no, 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 no. That was
75 maybe.
no, no, no. We're talking 1978, 79,
Fuck,
buddy.
I'd
We're
have to.
talking. We're
Yeah, I'd
going to
have to
the
look.
that's
I
what
can't even remember.
we're going to the late era of Ring magazine after they got fucked over with the well, not fucked over when they fucked themselves with the U.S. title
Yeah,
when
I
the
feel
U.S.
like I
title
probably
tournament.
should have known
And
this more solidly,
oh
but
yeah, this is the Nat LeBeau era, Nat LeBeau era, and where they were just taking any little photos and kind of like mashing them on the cover in one thing. But they decided to take Cat Davis with this awful, stupid cat T-shirt.
okay, yeah, you're right. August
Yeah,
78. Yeah,
there you go.
yeah.
Yeah, those late
and
70s ring magazines are kind of oof. I
and
don't know. For
so
whatever reason, I enjoyed looking at them just because of how bad they are, and I do collect them. But at the same time, yeah, that's what you were looking at. That cover is definitely oof.
and there is, and that in and of itself is fairly problematic. Um, because the reason why she was on the cover, number one, is because she was. I mean, how do I say this without being mean? um, Even today, much of how they try to market and promote women boxing is through sex appeal, and they tried to kind of gussy Kat Davis up a little bit and say she's pretty, she's hip, she, and she can fight, type of fucking thing. And so they featured her on the cover. But the reason why they featured her on the cover was because there was a feature story on her inside written by a guy named Sal Algieri. Thing is, this big feature written by Sal Algieri was not only her manager, but her boyfriend. And Sal Algieri actually
No
started,
conflict of interest at all.
and he actually was the person who started this first organization that was like the first women's boxing sanctioning organization, and they straight up made up rankings. They made up fight records for multiple people, brought in like women who've like never fought before and stuck them in the ring and said she's 14 and out, that type of shit. And just did it blatantly, got caught doing it. And then on top of that, like there was widespread suspicion that Kat Davis knew about it or knew something about it. And they were like shamed publicly. Like this is not some shit that like nobody knew. My
Mhm.
point is then why the focus on Jackie Tonawanda? Is it maybe because she's black?
Absolutely. I mean,
Come
I was
on.
not for a long, right? But here's another thing too. So Cat Davis is getting to the Hall of Fame, correct? Right.
Yeah,
So if you just saw me like over there scrolling on my phone, I wasn't paying attention. I was over trying to bring up something on a record. So it's crazy in the sense that a person like Cat Davis, just because she made the cover of Ring magazine and made a couple of appearances and promotional photos and all that, and she was a pretty face in the late 70s, that she gets her day in the sun and she's still alive, right? So I'm assuming she'll be there next year for this.
probably will. Yeah,
Yeah. Whatever. But
she got that Sue Fox mullet.
there was other women though from that era. Like I was just looking up one, and this is like fascinating to me. Like this girl named fuck, you can't see this on the shit. Her Cora Weber.
Okay,
So Cora Weber was only 6 and 5, but her career was from 1979 to 1999. And what's fascinating about her, because I remember reading about her in one of the KO magazines from the late 90s, because remember Lou Delvell's sister
hmm,
was a pro back then. Melissa
yep.
Salomon, I believe her name was. And she became pretty good too. She was successful in what she did, right? But she fought Cora Weber. Cora Weber back in the day, she was one of the early pioneers too, around that same class of Jackie Tonawanda and um Tiger Tremere and that whole group. In fact, she
Gwen
fought
Gemini. Yeah,
yeah. In fact, she fought Marion Tremere in 81 and won a decision over her. So the fact that she started her career in 79 and in 1999 she was fighting on the undercard of Pernell Whitaker against Felix Trinidad at Madison Square Garden against Melissa Salomon and going the distance in a very competitive fight is fucking awesome. That's the people that need to be recognized, not someone like Kat Davis. You know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to get at. Like, there are so many of these women out there who are still like plugging and just trying, like, they're a part of that group. And like, imagine 20 years after like your career started and you're still fighting at MSG in a high profile fight on a massive card. That's so cool to me.
yeah. And again, it's not to even get after Kat Davis. I don't
No, no, no,
care
I'm
what,
just, yeah,
I don't give a fuck what they made up. You know what I'm saying? And also the type of adversity they face just by being women in boxing. I
totally.
don't give a fuck what they made up. Who cares, bro? And like you said, Ray Robinson and his fucking team made up that he was undefeated as an amateur and promoted himself that way all the way until his first defeat to Jake LaMotta. And until people started recognizing, oh, he was fighting under a different name as an amateur. Why don't we research that? And we're
Yep.
able to find out that he had a number of Kid Chocolate, same thing. They said he was undefeated as an amateur and was undefeated and when he had several losses, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not, there are going to be people who say, yeah, but they actually had hundreds of fights and blah, blah, blah. I'm not even saying any of that, okay? We're talking about completely different standards when people didn't even want women to be in the ring fighting at all.
Yeah.
So they had to do some drastic shit. They had to prove themselves in drastic ways. It was dumb.
And it's
Point is,
still,
they all deserve their recognition, and
they
to
do.
focus on one over the other is dumb.
And it's crazy too because like it's only been the past few years. It's only been the past 15 years or so where women's boxing has finally gotten the like respect. That's the word, the respect that they actually deserve. Even during the Layla Ali era, there was still just kind of like exploitation. You know what I mean? Like Layla, for
Mia
instance,
St. John, bro, she's still the butt of a joke
yeah,
now.
exactly.
And she
Yeah.
was pretty good.
Yes. And when it came down to it, and when she finally got, you know what I mean, they gave her a chance, yes. Like she didn't win, she was tough as shit. And then you had also too, for instance, like it's just crazy to think because like, the Christy Martin era, everyone is just like, oh, finally remember that. And good for her because she did bring a lot of like attention to women's boxing and for what she did and all that. But like the competition that she was going through back then, especially the early times before she finally started fighting some good women that were coming up, was just like, my God. I watched one the other day on YouTube. she fought someone named Bethany Payne, I believe her name was. And that was like on the undercard of Tyson Holyfield 2 or some shit. I don't know. But eh, you know, Martin obviously knew how to fight, and Bethany Payne clearly was just like looked like a barroom brawler. You know what I mean? Just like chin up, swinging wildly, and that was what was being featured on TV all the time back then for women. Like it was to the point when they were trying to find an opponent for Christy Martin, and initially they had to go back and find an opponent who had beaten Christy Martin, but had been retired for 3 years, and convinced her to come out of retirement to fight her in a rematch. That was fuck, I remember. Her face is right there, but it um Andrea Deschong, that was her name, I think. But so they had that, and then Martin was still the dominant one, and then Lucia Riker came up, and that was supposed to be the super fight that everyone was waiting for, and then obviously that never happened. And there was just never been like a major super fight in women's boxing, I guess, up until recently, no? You know what I mean? Like with Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano, Clarissa Shields, and um who was Savannah Marshall,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Well, and I remember they tried to make a thing out of Layla Ali versus Jackie Frazier lied. And
Oh, I was there for that, bro.
I'm not saying it was a bad
I was
fight,
there
but it
for
was just
that.
dumb that they tried to promote it. It was Ali Frazier 4, It's like,
Oh, I remember the t-shirts too, and now unfortunately you can find those t-shirts online for over $100. Yeah, yeah. An Ali Frazier 4 t-shirt with Layla and Jackie Frazier on it. Ali
hey,
didn't show up to that fight.
what's that?
Muhammad didn't even show up to that fight. He was at a racing event for like NASCAR or something.
I wouldn't have shown up for that fight
Yeah.
either.
I think Joe was there. Tim Witherspoon fought Monty Barrett on the undercard, which was actually a decent fight. And that's all I remember about it. Yeah, Ali Frazier 4, that was at the turning stone.
I mean, and they tried to make a thing out of that, but I think a lot of writers too were like, come on, why are we being force fed this? But nonetheless, whether however you felt about it, it was good that they could actually feature, a women's fight. But you're right, it has only been coming up probably more like the last 5 to 10 years, it's really shot up. And a big part of that is the fact that they've had women's boxing in the Olympics, and there's been more women doing amateur boxing and being influenced to pick up boxing. And then, a number of influential gold medalists and medalists who have come out of the Olympics.
I mean, and the thing is, the talent has like come up incredibly well too. You know what I mean? Like you just see the skill level come up. And I don't mean to bring up another wrestling reference because I was talking about wrestling earlier, but it's true. You know, if like you watch wrestling back in the day, so you remember back in like the 90s and the early 2000s, especially where all women were just exploited, right? You had a divas title. They weren't called women, they were called a divas title. The
It's
matches they
Sable
had,
and fucking,
Stable, all that, their matches were bra and panties matches and this and that and just rolling
yeah, like
around
ripping each other's shit off and
shirt
stuff.
off and
Yeah.
just dumb shit. They weren't really given a chance to actually show what they can do. They were just being shown to be exploited. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, they weren't even giving them like cool moves or nothing. Like they were
anything,
just, yeah,
no, no, it was just roll around cap bullshit, which, for that late 90s era and early 2000s when everything was just like, shock drop and crazy shit. Of course, they just indulged that. But, now they like have the chance to really show off what they can do. All right. I mean, now like women's wrestling at this point is
oh, it's night and day.
it's night and
Night and
day.
day.
It's absolutely incredible what they're allowed, where the respectability is at with them and where they're at, like held in accord of like the promotion and just being wrestlers in general and what they do. Like,
Yeah,
being treated-
even if you don't
yeah,
like WWE or even if you don't like any
exactly.
organization, which, I get, but just it's a different product with
Yeah.
women now. Yeah.
In America, at least, because in Japan they always treated them like they should have been. But in
Yeah, that's a different story.
Japan, women wrestling is like the most incredible shit ever. But like, no,
Yeah, if you want to
it's,
watch some like brutal wrestling,
yeah.
yeah, even going back to like the 90s and shit,
Oh,
bro.
so I
Shit.
mean, there's beautiful, incredible matches. Akira Hokuto, lateral. But if in terms of America, like women's wrestling now is that like in terms of respectability and where it's at and just held in esteem, like it's where it's supposed to be. And that's the same thing for women's boxing now. You know, they finally have reached where they're at, where it's like a big event where they have like this fight or it's this and that. Like people recognize them for the skill that they have as opposed to just kind of being like a sideshow on the side. And you know, good for them on that. But like it doesn't help their cause when the pioneers of that are being criticized. You know what I mean? You know, you want to criticize, then like we said, you want to criticize Wanda, then Kat Davis should be criticized too if you look into her story. But you
Yeah,
can't just kind of like,
that's my point, is that the
I mean,
focus
yeah.
is not fair, and it
And
seems to
at
be
the
coming
same
for a
time,
really dubious reason.
exactly. And at the same time too, you know, you gotta take into account it was the 70s back then when these women were trying to do their thing. You know, it was the fucking wild, wild west, which boxing was in general.
Yeah,
All
you
right.
already brought up the ratings scandal, and that was
Yes.
with The Ring. I mean,
So I mean, it was even tenfold worse with women. You know what I mean? And trying to put them in
and
full fights and
wasn't
everything like
it,
that.
it was Randy Gordon? Well, I don't know. I know
I
that
think
he
I
I
don't.
know he was doing
I wasn't
writing.
sure who was writing for the Ring in the
I don't think
70s.
he was doing anything with The Ring, but I know he was a writer.
Oh well, he talks about his experiences with Tonawanda and that hit piece on the fucking Hall of Fame, which he's coincidentally going into. Um, and I think he said he was talking to her. I don't remember. I honestly don't remember when he said she initially reached out to him, but the whole piece was about him, you know, saying that she talked to him and yada yada yada, saying that she was the light heavyweight champion. Then he reached out to his sources and talked to him. I don't know, whatever it was, but like it was just he basically wrote that the Hall of Fame is going to be a sham if they put her in, and like made this whole spiel about it, you know. But
Yeah,
like
it wasn't all of the bad decisions they've made before, but if they let her in, then they've lost all credibility. It's
exactly.
over.
And that's what Scully and the rest of them keep on going on about today. It's that like
Yeah,
the
they
world's
can't let it go.
on going. They can't let that go. And it's absurd. I mean, she is a pioneer. Kat Davis is getting in. You guys ain't complaining because her box rec has a bunch of fights on it when all those were fucking shams to begin with. If you watch her footage, there is footage of her like training and stuff on YouTube. I don't know if it's still up there, but you remember you've seen it, right?
Yeah, there was actually I don't know if it's still up either, but there was actually a short-ish documentary about her that has a lot more than that too.
And correct me if I'm wrong, she didn't look that good, did she?
No.
Yeah.
Nah, man, you know who I'd take to whoop her ass was Barba Buttrick. She'd fuck her up, bro. Just saying.
Barbara Buttrick in the 70s would have been what, in her late 50s maybe or something?
Yup.
She would have definitely put the beats on her. She was like Mae Young and Fabulous Moolah at that point. Just come in and grab you and just slap the shit out of you. She wouldn't care. That's a legitimate Hall of Famer. Then, you know, is she still alive? Not there. She just passed away.
If she passed away, it must have been recently. But I mean, I know she was alive as of a few years. Now I gotta know. But she was alive as of a few years ago.
Feel like she did visit the Hall of Fame when she got inducted. I think she was there that year.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she was.
Like she was there, and Marion Tremere was there too.
Oh, bless. She's 95 years old. Bless her.
Kicking, good for
That's what
her.
it says.
Guarantee you, she'll still put her hands up too if you try
Probably
to
still
slap
has
her.
good technique.
Sure. And you know, like, but I'm just happy for the pioneers of them getting in. Like, I remember when Tiger Tremere got in that year, right? Like, it's not like there's always that one person getting in the Hall of Fame that no one really knows, but people kind of curiously go up and, you know, get your autograph or whatever it is. But she was in a wheelchair. Clearly, she's seen better days or whatever. But like, she was still like, you know, dolled up, like had makeup on, the whole thing. It just she looked so proud. The main thing, she looked proud. That's the main thing. She looked proud, you know, proud and happy.
She
Like
should be.
absolutely, you know what I mean? And she was there and like people were
She's
wheeling her.
probably the best fighter of the bunch.
And
You
she
know,
was taking photos with everybody that wanted to come up there. And I remember she was like, you know, talking to her career with people. I think she sang a song about her career that, like, I guess someone had a theme song about her. Like, she was just hyped, you know? And to see that she was getting that recognition just made me feel warm about that, right? Because obviously, you know, the male fighters, they've been getting adulation all their life, all right? From the moment they retired still and everything like that, appearances, all this other bullshit, things and then yada, yada, yada. But like, for one of those women who fought for everything they had to get and achieve in that career. And then when they retire, they're going to be forgotten because who the fuck's going to remember that? You know what I mean? All they're going to know, like their family and their close ones are going to know that they're a fighter, not like the general population, because exactly, and for them to finally get that, recognition from everyone like that and everyone coming up and taking photos, getting your autograph and doing that, and just generally getting that plaque on the wall is like awesome.
And in theory, then, it's kind of like, well, then why would you talk shit about the Hall of Fame? Why would you guys slag them off? Why would you guys, shit on them? And it's
Because
like
it's a Hall
because
of Fame.
they're fucking up the process. Because they're fucking up the process and we're not being able to honor the fighters that we probably should be and in a timely fashion, like I was bringing up with Israel Vasquez. And I'm not saying that to tug on heartstrings. I'm saying that because I believe that that's the reality, that it would be better to honor these fighters while they're still around if we can and if they deserve it. And some of the fighters that are around and deserve it are not being honored how they should
And
in
that's how
place
it's
of
that's
some
what it's
others.
supposed to be. It's a Hall of Fame of like and not the Hall of Fame because you're famous or you made an influence. No, it's that's if that's the thing. If you made an influence and you're a popular dude, that's when you donate your shit to there, and that's when you have your like. There's a lot of fighters in the Hall of Fame that are not in the Hall of Fame that have their robes and various memorabilia and stuff that are remembered because of the stuff they have there. They don't need to actually have a plaque on the wall saying they're a member of the Hall of Fame. That's the whole thing. All right. If you look at Israel Vasquez, and I don't have box rec up, and I haven't looked at it yet today, and don't intend to now, but like, go just look at what he did. All right. His first title win was all right. I don't remember who did he first beat for the belt. Do you remember?
Gosh, I was gonna say maybe Oscar Larios, but now I gotta
I
look.
mean, he beat Larios early. I know he lost the rematch to him for the interim title for the interim WBC belt, but like, he comes back, and then here's the thing: is that if you compare him to Vinny Paz, all right, he beats Larios 2 out of 3. He comes back in that incredible win against Johnny Gonzalez. I had a number of other defenses in the interim between those two, more than Paz, who never had a defense. And then the first 3 fights with Rafael Marquez, which goes down because if you don't consider that fourth fight, which I don't, which goes down as one of the greatest trilogies in boxing history. And he won 2 out of 3 of those, especially that last fight, which he put everything into it and like pulled it out in that end. You know what I mean? And just looking at that, that's just the top of his shit. And then there's still like depth under that. And you mean to tell me that's more not worthy enough than Vinny Paz, who never made a title defense, who never beat like a legitimate the best in his division, who lost to other guys anytime he really stepped up against like, a person ranked in the ring or other magazine, lost pretty comprehensively. What are we doing here? Is this where we're at now? Because now we're at an all-time low with this. And again, this is not a knock on Vinny Paz as a person or his popularity or whatever it may be, because I liked him as a kid growing up in New England or whatever it may be, but it's just the basic matter of the facts over here. You know what I mean? If you're a voter, how do you justify voting for him? Like, what is your reasoning for that? Like, why do you call him a Hall of Famer? I don't understand that. You know what I mean? When you have so many other people on that ballot that can do that. And then it goes for other people too, not even just Vinny Paz at this moment, where someone was like, I want to vote for Sean Porter, I want to vote for Mikey Garcia, or I want to vote for fucking, who else did we see? Arthur Abraham, or I want to vote for
I mean, at
Butte or
least
something.
at least
Oh,
Mikey
like,
could have been considered the best in his division at one time, but none of the other guys were.
no. I like Sean Porter a lot. Seems like the nicest guy on the planet. Was a hell of a
Yeah, he
fighter
seems
during his
cool.
time to watch. A very fun fighter to watch, but was he ever the best in his division? Every time he had like what was his best wins? His best wins were um what, Danny Garcia, Broner, when it comes down
That's
to it,
about
like
it.
you know what I mean? He lost to Keith Thurman. He lost he lost to Crawford. He lost to Kell Brook, and he lost to who else?
Well, he lost to Kelbrook, Keith Thurman, Errol Spence,
Errol Spence.
Crawford, and then that first fight with Julio Diaz, that draw, that could have been a loss.
Oh yeah, 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 that one too.
Like, he got beat up a little bit in that one in the
Yeah.
end.
And so like, I made this joke with you earlier too. that before we recorded a couple of days ago, I was like, back in the day, a lot of people used to always make that comment, why isn't Jerry Corey in the Hall of Fame? Jerry Corey should be in the Hall of Fame. He should be on the ballot, yada yada yada, blah 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 blah. And I would always shake my head or laugh about it, or just not even think about it, or just kind of not question it, right? And it comes down to it now, have we dropped the fucking ball so much, or you know, and being in terms of being allowed to and being inducted that at this point Corey should have been years ago.
Yeah, and that's the problem is that like, all right, well then if we're changing what the dynamic is, then you got to let us know because then we're gonna be not voting the same, I guess.
I mean,
But
seriously, if that's the case, if you want to put Vinny Paz in how many middling, champions before that made a number of defenses that should be on the ballot now instead of that? Why isn't Roger Mayweather on the ballot now for that matter, right? Why isn't
yeah, dudes who were like just champions, kind of normal champions but colorful. Where's
Yeah.
Michael Elijah Day?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. If he was really popular, everyone loved Elijah. They looked like Michael Jackson. Let's vote him and I'd vote for him. Fuck that.
I mean, it's it
We all
just
love
doesn't make
Frank.
sense.
We all love Benny Briscoe. I'm just,
Yeah, dude, it doesn't make any
um,
sense, bro.
yeah, like Yaki Lopez. Why isn't he on the ballot then? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah,
And
it's
I'm not
dumb.
even like throwing these guys out there saying. I'm just saying these guys have better record. I think, in my opinion, have better resumes than Vinny Paz does. Yet somehow he gets onto the hall and it gets in.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, dude.
Yeah,
I don't get it.
but here we are. That's all we need to vent about this, man. Thanks for letting me vent.
Well, yeah, I mean, hopefully nobody's ears or eyes were appalled by what they heard or saw. I mean, I don't know. It's just
I mean, if you're smart, then they weren't.
we feel pretty strongly about it, but I mean, hopefully if you listen or watch, then it's the kind of thing where you know that we're not just coming from nowhere with this. It's not like we don't know anything, and it's not like we have no respect for what's going on here or anything like that. It's in fact the exact opposite, and that's why we're fucking, not even so much upset, but just disappointed, dude. I feel like a fucking parent now. I'm not even upset, just
It is
disappointed.
though. It is disappointment, man. The
Like,
Hall
come
of
on,
Fame
man.
had like a certain respectability of where, like, at least back in the day, where you thought like only the best of the best was going to get in, and that's why a guy like Ken Norton was being questioned of being inducted because the what's the word I'm thinking of, like the the
Qualifications or
yeah,
whatever
exactly, the qualification. I'm sorry, my brain just rotted. Like the qualifications of getting in
has
was
nothing
so
to do with
high.
weed.
Not at all. But like, you know what I mean? That's the main thing of it, like the qualifications of how you can get in. And for that to be like that now is just like the bar to be that low now is crazy to me. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, and hopefully we've laid out, logical and righteous reasons why we disagree with it.
Yeah.
And, I don't think that we're out of line. Perhaps I'm sure some others will. I know some others will because obviously this is the result. So that's fine. People are welcome to disagree. But, look, I feel like just in general, not just you and I, but obviously you and I, because we talk a lot, we agree about a lot of shit. We seem we feel farther and farther away from the boxing establishment and the people involved in it and the way that they think and the way that they do shit. It feels like there's a very big gap growing that I don't understand I mean, not that like I don't literally don't understand, but I don't agree with how the direction shit is going and it just feels not cool.
1,000,000%. Yep.
Anyway, hey, dude, I appreciate you letting me rant too, because I had a couple ones in me as well, and it was whatever. Yeah, everybody, thank you so much for listening in. We also appreciate you, and if you watched on YouTube, also appreciated. Go ahead and subscribe on whatever boxing podcast app. Oh, there's no boxing podcast app, but podcast app. Subscribe on the podcast apps, and go ahead and subscribe on YouTube as well. Comments and ratings on either one appreciated. Of course, visit us on social media. Look us up. You'll find us. There's also the little thingies below us. Eris, I'll talk to you soon, bro.
Later.